Welcome to Platform Diaries with Shane Williams, where each fortnight you'll hear the stories of industry veterans and learn the secrets to sustainably amplifying value from your software platform investments.
Have you ever been through the arduous RFP process and trying to select an integration partner? Have you ever wondered what goes on the other side of that relationship? Perhaps you've wondered what a successful partnership looks like. Today's episode is the first in a multi-episode series on getting the most from your partner relationship. Welcome to Platform Diaries. I'm your host, Shane Williams. My guest for this episode is Tsiamis, Associate Partner at IBM. Having cut his teeth riding the wave of growth of Salesforce's longest-standing global strategic partner, Lee has gained over a decade of experience in strategic partnering. We discuss how an SI juggles their sales objectives with your outcomes, the alternatives to a traditional RFP process, how to approach sourcing a partner for your next project, and the importance of trust in an enduring partner relationship. Before we jump in, yet another reminder about my book, The Platform Owner's Guidebook, How Industry Experts Unlock Value from Enterprise Software. It's available for purchase now at platformdiaries.com. And with that out of the way, let me introduce you to Lee. Lee Tsiamis, thanks for joining Platform Diaries.
Hey Shane, it's a pleasure to be here. A real honor, actually. Thanks for having me.
Now, today I want to have a chat about partnering and getting the best from a partner relationship between sort of client and partner. And to that end, full transparency, you and I have known each other for a long time and have operated in that capacity for probably the best part of a decade. So I appreciate you making the time to try and share a little bit about what a long-term partnership looks like. But I'm also, for the benefit of people who don't know you or haven't known you for 10 years, I think we should talk a little bit about why you're here other than just knowing me and your story about how you came to be a associate partner at IBM. So if you don't mind, would you mind just giving listeners a little bit of a recap on your journey and, you know, what you do now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is an awesome topic to talk about today, especially after reading your book. And congratulations on that, by the way.
Thanks, mate.
I have had a journey. I've been pretty lucky, actually, in the opportunities that have come up. I did telecommunications engineering at university, and I actually met a lot of great people there that I still work with today. And coming out of being a telecommunications engineer, I went into building, designing, but most importantly, supporting the systems for customers. So, putting in contact centers, call centers. They were integrated in with, CTI. So out of that, not only did I use my telco degree, but I had to man the phones. So when someone's system went down, I was also the person that they called to complain. And through that role, I gained a lot of empathy. What these guys actually felt when a core system wasn't working, their phone system wasn't working. And back then, this is going back sort of 15, 16 years. I mean, that was a core system. You couldn't get in touch, through all the channels you could today. So I moved from that role of understanding the value of a core system and the value of a relationship into a startup in the Salesforce space. And that was through meeting someone at that organization called IPFX, who started Veltio, and that was Con. I think you know Con from previous life as well. And Frank and Jamie, and Frank, you've interviewed in one of your previous podcasts before. They were the founders of a company called Veltio. They hired me into Veltio as one of their first employees. And that's where I really took off in the Salesforce space as a developer. Through that startup, like any startup, I wore multiple hats. And I think 2.5 years after joining Veltio, we were acquired by Blue Wolf, which was a global Salesforce consultancy led by Eric Berridge, who, funnily enough, is EVP at Salesforce now. So it goes to show this is a large but small community. So grew up in multiple roles at Blue Wolf through running projects, still doing development, running big teams, delivery director, running a managed services practice. And so at every point, I had support into reinventing myself in a new role in an area that I knew so much about. And then Blue Wolf was eventually acquired by IBM. So we had this great big startup culture that just got swallowed by this huge machine. And it was such a surprise that IBM were going to buy Blue Wolf. And it eventually made sense. And IBM wasn't what I thought IBM was. It was actually this really cool company with, designers talking about customer journeys and, the moments that matter for a customer and digital interfaces. And then they just happened to have this big swag of technology that supported that as well. So that was my journey into IBM. And then once I got into IBM, it was interesting to see all of these really great minds that weren't thinking just about, you have a problem, I have a widget to fix that problem. It was, what's causing the problem? Who's experiencing the problem? And through coaching of some of those people, and I'd love to name them, there's just so many that support me in that role at IBM, I just learned how to think that way and take that thinking that IBM had and bring it to, my co-workers at Blue Wolf, because that's what I've always been about, the team, building the team, getting that team thinking a certain way to take that to a client. And so that's how I found my way to be an associate partner in the customer transformation practice at IBM. And it is, it's a couple of big words and fluffy words there, but that's what we do, work on digital transformations for our customers, using that way of thinking. And then obviously a lot of the Salesforce platform backs that up, but it's a much larger ecosystem than that now.
And here I was describing you as just a dodgy sales guy, and yet here you are coming from a service and a customer-focused background. So, just taking the piss, mate. Thanks for joining us. So I'd love to kind of dive a little bit into why I wanted to cover this topic and why this is going to be a 3 or 4 episode series on the topic. And you called me out on it too, as you said, when you read the book. So I didn't cover the topic of partnering in my book. And it was a conscious and deliberate decision for a couple of reasons. One is it's a massive rabbit hole. And when I started unpacking my IP around it, I realized it's almost a book in and of itself. I didn't really want to distract the intention, which was how to mature your practice through just talking about how to partner, right? But secondly, I feel like it's contextual, hyper-contextual, depending on the size of the organization and the culture of your organization about how you go about partnering. And so I thought this is best served by having conversations with people about the topic and kind of thrashing out all the different angles and then letting people draw their own conclusions about what makes sense for them. And so to that end, I think I'll dive into this conversation today, and that is that I've just used the word, I think, vendor and partner interchangeably, and I'm absolutely guilty of doing that. I've used vendor, SI, ISV, a whole bunch of different names to describe the people who help you get shit done, right? And I've even been called out on social in the past for using those terms interchangeably by someone who works for a partner and was quite distressed about the fact that they didn't see themselves as a vendor. So shout out to that person, and I apologize. But I think we've known each other for long enough that we can probably have this conversation, and you know that I've got a pretty healthy skepticism for most things. And I reckon, using the term partner, I wouldn't necessarily agree that every system integrator could genuinely call themselves a partner. And I think maybe this is unfair, and I'd love your perspective on it coming from the other side of the fence. But I always have this skepticism about if the person who's supposedly your partner is chasing a sales target, then which part of that tension is going to win, right? And it might be, I really want you to be successful, Shane, as long as I hit my number this month. And I think maybe it's provocative. And for those who are listening, Lee's got a massive grin on his face right now because he can see where I'm going with this. And it's meant to be provocative, right? But for the C-suites who are out there who are kind of sharing this cynicism, could you maybe share some insight from your perspective or from the partner perspective about what partnering looks like and then how you achieve that balance of customer interest versus partner interest?
Wow, you're right. This topic could just go for days. And I actually love your question, because if you get trapped on one side of the fence without at least sitting on the fence every once in a while and considering the other side, I think it's to the detriment of your project or the outcomes of a relationship. There's 2 terms you used in your question that I think we should pick apart. One is partnership and the other is SI. You can have both, but you can also have just SI. All right. And this is up to the customer. We don't work for free. We're a business. In fact, every business I've ever worked with has been quite successful in this journey, and IBM one of the most successful in history. But that doesn't mean you can't have a partnership as well. So, and I think the way you and I have worked over the years, and maybe we'll dive into this a little bit more, is a great example of that. And I've got a lot of customers like this. You can say, hey, I need you to come in and do this project for me. It's a very specific engagement, and I need you to do it for the best possible price, right? Now, for me, I'm a relationship manager. I would love to have more than a 6-month engagement with you. But if you tell me this is all we're doing, this is my scope, then what you're doing is you're actually engaging me as a systems integrator. And I know this is going to come down to a race to the bottom, and I'm going to focus on price. Okay? That's what it's going to be. Whereas if you say, hey, Lee, we're on this 5-year transformation, or a 3-year, or a 2-year transformation. And I think there are 10 components to that transformation, and we just need some help to get to point X, right? I've got a very capable team. I've got stakeholders who are very engaged and supportive, but we need specialists. Now we're talking a totally different conversation. So the push and pull between what am I going to do to hit my numbers? Yes, I've got numbers. We've got people. And once a person doesn't bill their time, you can't bill their time again, right? And that's the pressure that we face as an SI. When someone sits on the bench, you never, ever get that time back to make that money again. So I'm always under pressure to sell that person. But if I can strike a relationship and build a partnership with somebody, I know that if I miss 2 hours or 2 days or 2 weeks of that individual on the bench, I will likely make that up in the long run because I won't have to battle as hard to sign up a new client in the future. So if you come to me with that 2-year discussion or that 5-year discussion, or, I need help and I want to, put some faith in this relationship to do that, that's the difference between building a partnership versus just contracting an SI. And so when you're sitting there as a customer, to everybody listening, thinking, are they just pushing their sales targets? Well, build the relationship and ask them, build the relationship and say, hey, we have a big program of work here. Let's figure out a commercial model where you take some risk and I take some risk and we both end up winning. Because all too often, customers put so much emphasis on the day rate that they forget to talk about outcomes and value. And at some points, they have to re-implement. And spending 2 or 3x of your business case is a lot worse than 5% of a day rate to make sure you're in a healthy relationship with an SI.
It's interesting, and it kind of touches on something that I wasn't going to talk about today, but since you bring it up, I think it's an interesting tangent, which is I've seen organizations have 2 or 3 proposals on the table and they're KPI'd, which means they're compelled to pick the one that they screwed the price down the most on, regardless of whether it's the right fit. And you can see everyone around the table going, we know from having the conversation that this is the right cultural fit. We know that this is the right delivery model. We know they've got the best skills in the particular piece of tech that we're implementing, but we were able to screw this other partner down by $10 a day on these people. So we're compelled to pick them because our KPIs say we have to. And I remember sitting there, it's happened more than once. I remember sitting there going, this is insane. The KPI is counterproductive because you're going to end up with not the right solution or end up spending more because the people don't have the expertise in the long run. Yet here we are picking the number because there's a KPI that says so. And just not even thinking about the fact that a unit price versus a value and delivery and total cost doesn't come into it. I imagine you've seen this before.
Too often with household names, which is scary because, you talk to some of the people like Ben, who deals with talent, with people, right? In previous podcasts. The conversation you have with me as a customer who's trying to screw me down on price versus a conversation I'll have with another one of my customers, because make no mistake, I'm running 12 deals at any one time, right? It's what I get paid to do. And if I have 50% of my customers focused on great outcomes on a relationship that's healthy for me and them, and then another 50% of my clients who just want to screw me down another $100 a day, okay? Now I know that I need to service everybody, and that's okay. But when I've got a great talent in my organization who's a solution architect or a developer or consultant, doesn't really matter who they are, right? And I've got another great one, but not as good, right? Who am I going to send my best talent to? The organization who's creating a great environment, who is creating a healthy relationship, or the one who is trying to screw me down for every last dollar? I think as a customer, you should consider that it's not all about the day rate. In fact, you even talk about it in your book. What's the cost of a project being delayed by a month or 6 months or even a year? And that impact could be from getting the wrong talent. And getting the wrong talent can be because you just focus too much on price and not enough on a healthy deal. That's why it's called a partnership. So there's that side to it. In fact, that's probably one of the biggest sides to it. If you're focused purely on day rate, you're going to get organizations who are still trying to make profit off people because they're in business, and they're still trying to race to the bottom because they want to win your work at the same time. It's not a healthy way to run a project.
That's fascinating, because that makes me think of two different topics that I wanted to cover. So let me try and grab the first one, which is, you talked about mutual benefit, and I think the question for me is, if you're going into a deal or you're going into talking to partners for the first time, and I'm looking for a partner's perspective on this, right? So I'm client X, and I want to go to market to find the right SI, or I'm actually looking for a partnership. Putting aside the potential for this to be abused for a second, but in an ideal world where nobody was trying to pull a Swiftie on you, how would an ideal client approach a partner? And what I mean by that is it just, I got this much money, I'm looking for an outcome? And I don't think that's the answer, because I think you alluded to that's not the great outcome. But what does it look like? What's the best approach? Client coming to market, right? And saying, I need an outcome, or I want to spend this much money, or I've already decided what my day rates are. I mean, there's a million ways I imagine people approach this stuff, right? In your view, if someone walks in the door you've never met before and goes, I need your help, what does the best approach look like?
So this varies a lot, but in the experience I've had, even in the last 24 months, I've seen some really mature ways that clients are coming to market. And they're coming to market for capability and partner fit before they come to market for a project. And I think the advantage of doing that is you're allowed now to go and ask a partner what they're good at, and to prove it, and to come in and meet your team, and to come in and talk about their commercial constructs and the flexibility they have in approaching different projects in different ways. And that might be through risk sharing, it might be through the standard T&M or fixed price or outcome-based models. So coming to market for a partnership means that when your team come up with their initiatives, they can decide, okay, based on everyone that we talked to, and we did their reference checks with their customers, who are always going to be good, by the way. I think it's an interesting thing, reference checks. But we can say, we're going down a route to do a contact center transformation. Who seem to be the strongest in that space? Let's approach them and let them guide our roadmap, right? Versus, we're going to give technical specification to 6 different partners, and then they're all going to give us pretty much the same response, and we're going to whittle them down based on price and how pretty the presentation was. So I think coming to market for a capability and relationship fit is a much more mature way to start selecting who you're going to work with. Now, there's capability, which is a big part of that, but then there's also trust, right? I think this has come up before in this conversation, but who felt right? When you were going through the capability assessment and you had to make some additional calls, who responded rapidly? Who gave you a great answer and not just a canned answer that you could have found on their website? Who went the extra mile? Building that trust early before you start talking about technology solutions is going to get you a better outcome. I think that's the best way to go to market.
Fair enough. It's interesting, because I reckon there'll be people, me included, because it's the first thing that pops in my head, and I said I'm playing the cynical card today, which is, the ask is, get us in the room to tell you what you need to do. Now, I think there's some merit to that in some respects, right? Like, how would I know? You're supposed to be the expert. Why wouldn't I ask your opinion, right? There's also the flip side that says, I don't know what this is going to cost me, so please try and extract the most amount of money out of me in telling me what I need and overselling me, right? You used the word trust a second ago, and maybe that's the answer, right? There's this, we can talk about how to build it in a second, but maybe that's the answer is, if I don't trust you, my cynicism kicks in and I assume you're just trying to bleed me. But likewise, if I did trust you, then I'd be like, okay, well, we've asked the experts for their opinion and we've got it. Now we need to make an educated decision about whether we have an appetite for that, but at least we know what good looks like. I'm assuming you can see the alternate perspective on that one, right? Which is how this could go pear-shaped if the trust wasn't there.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can talk about building trust in a minute, but when you talk about the going to market for capability, I think a lot of listeners will think of, okay, well, that's a panel. It is kind of a panel, but probably less official than that. It's like running a beauty pageant sort of thing, But off the back of that, you don't have to choose one. And I think that's where a lot of customers get caught up. I have to choose this SI. You should select based on capability. There's no problem with saying we have a really large program of work and we think that there are two SIs that are going to be beneficial to getting the right outcome here, right? Because one has a lot of experience in this section, which is core, but another has a lot of experience running the program, which we really need help with. Or there are three components that we need, and one is really strong in two, and another is really strong in one. And so doing these rapid low risk, now low risk to your business, not low risk to the SI, low risk to the business pieces of work or proof of concepts or pilots is a great way to see if what you thought based on the panel conversations or the beauty pageant actually turns out to be true. That way, if it doesn't go right, it does go pear-shaped. As an organization, you haven't really lost much because maybe it was low cost, short time frame, not a massive impact. But at the same time, you can understand that trust and capability and what the partner is capable of delivering in a healthy relationship in a period of 3 months. I mean, that's a pretty short time frame if you're considering a 2 or 3 year transformation program.
You're right. You've talked about a couple of different things there, right? Like, I guess I would call it a rapid POC, and then you talked about panels and beauty pageants, and there's this emerging groundswell of advocacy for what they're calling agile procurement, which I'm going to be fascinated to dive into in a future episode. But I'm going to put something out there that's a bit provocative. I'd love your view on this, but I think that the RFP is a relic and it needs to die. And there's a few people who probably sit in there now, particularly if you're in procurement, and I've just, questioned their deity or something. But I feel like it had a purpose and it's probably never going to go away anytime soon, right? Because there's just going to be too many organizations who are too wed to it. And I've said this a couple of times and I've had violent objection to the statement. And I've had other people turn around and go, hell yeah, those things suck. Like, it serves no purpose other than to chew up a bunch of time. So the challenge with that is, and you named a couple of different approaches you could take, but I don't necessarily think there is a silver bullet alternative. And to my early point when we started the podcast, right, I think it probably depends on the organization and the approach and the style and the project and a few other elements. But I'd love your view on this. And maybe you want to plead the fifth and not answer. but what do you reckon? I feel like we need to come up with something better than an RFP.
Yeah, it's funny. I should be careful here because half my life is responding to RFPs. Not that anyone should care how the SI feels about receiving RFPs, but there's always a few on the run, and I question their value because you're now judging me based on a spreadsheet with technical responses that if every SI that you've gone to market to is up to scratch, should be the same answer. There shouldn't be a great difference in the technical response in an RFP. Most have similar day rates as well. So If the team structure is the same, there shouldn't be much of a change in the team structure. And this comes back to, what are you actually trying to achieve from the RFP, from the program of work, from the individual project that you've gone to market for? And you should consider how much time and money you're spending internally. It's not just, going to market and asking for it, but writing the thing in the first place. And did you capture all the right requirements? Did you have the right brains on the ground that know everything about that space to get the best outcome from your business? Or is it somebody who's so entrenched in your business, they're asking the questions that they think need to be asked? So you might not be getting the best value for the solution you're asking for. You might not be getting the variance from your SIs because they're all responding in a similar way. At which point there's a point system, and I've won RFPs by half a point, 0.5% out of 100, right? How does that even work? And I'm glad I won it, but I'm sure I've lost a few by that much as well. So I agree violently. I don't think RFPs are the right way, and I know that they have to be done because you have to get 2 or 3 or 4 prices back in order to make a decision with the exec team. There is several other ways, and a way that we've been using that's well published with IBM is through our garage methodology, where we help make decisions on, what are the 50 problems. Now, what are the 10 problems out of those 50? Now, what are the 5 or 2 problems out of those 10? Okay, great. Let's pick one of those and do it really, really quickly, like quick and dirty, prove that this will give you value and show you that our delivery model will work with your business. And that's not a delivery model. It could be any number of delivery models that we together as a customer and an SI figure are going to work together. But again, to get to that point of you're going to let us into your business and help you make those decisions, and you're actually going to spend some money with us to do that, it does take that trust. And whether that trust comes from the brand, whether it comes from a previous relationship, or whether it comes from a really good sales pitch, it's hard to get to that point in the first place. And so I think, I'm probably crossing a line here, but I'll do it anyway, just for you, Shane. I think procurement teams need to factor in a bit more risk. It's okay to have risk in your deal. I think putting something as an RFP in a fixed price adds more risk than bringing someone in and working collaboratively. Because in a fixed price engagement, someone's going to lose every single time. You're either going to lose because you have to pay more because the scope wasn't set correctly, or the SI is going to lose and they're not going to work with you again because they signed up to too much to win the deal and now they are not making anything off it. I mean, every SI, they're all a business. They're all there to make money, right? So taking risk on the other side from procurement team could actually get you a better outcome.
Yeah, you touched on a couple of things there too, which is, I think you said, spending some money to help work out what the solution looks like. And I'm all for investing in innovation, right? And testing a hypothesis without spending too much money to work out what the art of the possible is, test a market, test a product, whatever it looks like, right? But I know I've spoken to people, and I think verbatim the words were, so you want me to pay that organization to tell me what they're going to charge me to do the work? And like a violent objection to that should be pre-sales. And whilst I agree in some respects, like there's an element of pre-sales to prove out your capability as a partner, my counsel at the time was, I almost see the work that you're asking them to do as phase 0 of your project anyway, right? And even if you didn't pay them and you made them go through the RFP thing, once the team lands and then they start getting an understanding of your business and meeting your team and getting your requirements and whatnot down, they're burning that money anyway, right? So it's almost like you're going to pay for phase 0, whether it's after you sign the deal or before it, but at least going this way, you'll get a better sense of a genuinely educated estimate of what it's going to cost you, so you can decide whether you even want to do this thing before you've signed the deal, because you've got a smaller investment to prove out what it's really going to cost. I'm working with clients at the moment who, have in various organizations who have made assumptions, and the reason I've been brought in is because it's gone pear-shaped, right? But they've looked at, we think something's going to cost this much. Partner comes in, does the first 2 months of work, and then says, you're not even close. The scope you estimated to the amount of money that you've budgeted is order of magnitude 10 times out. And there's a sticker shock, right? And the immediate reaction is, oh, this partner's trying to screw me and whatnot. And I think the answer is no. me as the independent having a look at this and playing, that seat at the table that represents the customer and goes, right, I don't represent the partner implementing this and I don't, whatever. Guys, you underestimated this. Like, this is, and it's an order of magnitude. Let me explain why. Because, my immediate reaction as the client is to go, oh, these guys are trying to, shaft me. When really it's just, to be fair, you're not the tech experts. That's why you brought the tech experts in. But you assumed that your non-educated decision or assumptions wouldn't go pear-shaped. So I think that's an interesting one. That's just me going on a diatribe. I don't even expect you to answer that one unless you've got an opinion on it.
Actually, I'd love to answer it. And I think you answered it yourself, which I'll reiterate. You're going to pay for it anyway. Okay, so that's the first point. The second point is, and I want to be careful to the listeners. We're not just talking about the big end of town here, just because I'm IBM. I'm talking through my experience from working on small, projects with small businesses to the biggest of big, right? You're going to pay for it anyway. So get creative. Go and ask your partner, hey, I want to do this work. I'm not sure how much it's going to cost me. I want you to come in and do it for nothing. And if we get to the point where it looks like we're in the ballpark for a project, that will be your investment to win the project. And if we get to the point where you tell me it's going to cost me 10x what we can actually afford, and we can't reduce the scope or whatever that might be and change our business case, we'll pay you for your time. There's not one SI that will say no to that. Now, I don't want to give away too many trade secrets, but I'm pretty sure every SI would say, yep, that sounds like a pretty fair deal. And you know what you just did as a client? You just took the first step towards building a trusted partnership by saying, hey, we're going to give and take a little bit here. We think you're the right partner. We've talked about your capabilities. We're going to have a go with you. And as a first step, you're going to do some investment for me. And if we figure out it doesn't work, we'll pay you for the work. And you agree on that value and off you go. I mean, you are going to pay for that anyway. And at least through that, you're actually putting it back on your SI to put in their best quality work to make sure they hit your budgets, they hit your outcomes, and they give you a path to success, knowing all the skeletons in the closet, rather than responding to an RFP knowing none of the skeletons in the closet, never talking to the exec team about what the outcomes really are, and never doing a ride along with someone in the business, for example. That's a way to build a partnership at a very early stage.
And speaking of that partnership, and coming back to the RFP piece, one of the things that I've counseled people on, and I guess I'd love your perspective on this too, and we've been through this dance a couple of times. What do you reckon you're about? 60% hit rate on winning my business over 10 years, give or take?
Yeah, 50, 60%. It's about
so
that.
We've done the dance a few times, and it doesn't always land with, the way you might like. But I get the sense that, and one of the reasons I don't like the RFP process is that it's kind of, you're responding to something that you don't get to test. You don't even realize what some of the assumptions are. You can't test them. And I've put it together, and I might have a really good internal team who kind of gets what we think the solution looks like and whatnot. But in some respects, I'm always a big fan of critical thinking, right? And so how can somebody critically assess your design or your assumptions if they haven't got that ability to kind of look under the hood, lift the kimono, and see what's actually going on? So I feel like you get to the end of the RFP process and somebody's responded to the 50 questions in a spreadsheet, and then you can calculate up the responses. But I think the bit that's missing is, A, have you tested your assumptions? And have you had a critical conversation about that? But once you start going, okay, now we're down to the next phase of this, which is show us your rate card and show us the people you're going to put on it and whatnot. It's kind of analogously like getting a quote for a painter to paint your house. Right? I want the house painted inside and out. I want a good quality job. I want it done in a week or something, right? And they go, yeah, sure, no worries. I've quoted it up. It's going to take me a couple of days and I'm going to charge you, 20 grand. And you go, yeah, 20 grand smells about right, but I don't like the amount of money that you're charging me for brushes. And that seems a little bit expensive on the quality of the paint. And I go, do you want your house painted or not, mate? Like, I get that there's a premium, this is $1 million property job, and this is a shitty rental, and I just want to get the marks off the wall for the next person to move in, right? But I feel like that's a conversation about value, where you go, what am I willing to spend to just cover this up? Or do I want a premium job? And then you can make an assessment on whether you think that's value for money. But I can't imagine you sitting there with a painter asking them to itemize the brand of paint and the type of brushes and the how many drop sheets and whatnot, and getting into that level of detail. Yet it feels like that's exactly what we do with the RFP process. We prescribe exactly how you're going to paint it, with how many people and for how long, and then you get the response and you go, yeah, nah, I don't like that. Now, caveat all that with, I think there's a place for the rate card conversation, but it's not useful all the time. I mean, I talk about this in my book. It's no secret, right? I have a preference for where it fits the organization for building an internal capability and augmenting with partner resources. But that only works in an organization where culturally, and you get management support for this, that you're responsible for the outcome and you're responsible for the deliverables, and you're asking the partner to augment you with good quality people that can help you get there, right? And I think at that point you go, I need a rate card for people, but I only want the best people, and there's no leverage for you to go in unders and overs. I'm going to make some money out of this. So the rate card's useful, but it's only useful because I go, I want the best people. What do they charge? What do they cost? And am I willing to pay that much money, right? Beyond that, I reckon you spin the conversation to value and go, yeah, and this is about what you were just talking about help us come in and understand the problem and help you estimate this thing, right? We estimate this is going to take 12 to 18 months and it's going to cost you $30 million. And then you sit there and go, well, for a $30 million investment, I'm going to get $2 million back in return. That feels like a good investment. Or for a $30 million investment, I'm going to get $20 million back. It's a bad investment. But what it's going to cost to get you the outcome and comparing that to the value of that outcome is a very different conversation to going, I still want the value, but now I want a nickel and dime on the cost to get me the solution. Like, I think that's why I think the RFP is dead. Or it should die. It's not dead. It's alive and well. It's probably just...
It's thriving.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, it needs a lockdown strategy to eradicate it, you know. And then another diatribe, but food for thought. So I might take us on a bit of a journey now. We've talked a couple of times about the importance of trust between the partner and how that is kind of the differentiator between a good outcome and not. And I think everything we've talked about has kind of been a subcontext or a thread that's sort of been drawing through. So I'm not sure that that's necessarily, people going, yeah, trust is fine, but you don't build that overnight, right? It's got to be a bit of give and take, and you've got to get to know each other. And to your point, I think you've given a couple of options around how you might look to build that quickly or prove it out early and whatnot. But I also feel like trust is something that takes a while to build. It doesn't take long to erode. And, like by way of example, I know that you could have a really great relationship and then all of a sudden the key person that's working in your business from your partner gets moved to another account or leaves the organization and leaves you in a hole, right? And you're like, wow, we didn't realize how much of a key person risk we had on that person. And now that they're leaving, which, taking your selfish hat off for a second might be absolutely the best move for that human who wants to take another step in their career or take a career break or is having kids or something, right? But selfishly, you're like, well, I feel like my project hangs on that person and all of a sudden the relationship gets eroded, right? Yeah, I guess clients can be fickle, right? It's like, well, no, you took that person away, now I'm dirty, or, you're not doing enough to win my love. So I'd love your thoughts on this, mate. How do you know when you're in the sweet spot in terms of partnership, and what does good look like?
I work with people. Yep. You and I have done work together on brands when I've worked across Blue Wolf, IBM, even Veltio. And you've worked across a number of brands as well, as I have with, many other clients that I hold in the same vein as yourself. But I still worked with you. And I still worked with those individuals, and you still worked with me. And there are many people in my team that you have worked with as well and built equal trusted relationships with. So I think the big part of this is not to disregard your relationship with an individual, not necessarily the brand. I know I'm in the sweet spot when I get the call to say, hey, we're going to do this, and I think you're not the right partner for this. I'm going to offer it to you because, that's what we should do as organizations. But I think there's another partner I want to work with. Now, for me, it's a bit heartbreaking. I'm like, oh, man, got to hit my targets. But on the other hand, it's like, okay, great. I appreciate you talking that through with me, and it gives me a little bit of insight into the market and where my gaps are with my organization, and also into our relationship. The second part is maybe we are working together and we've already won something together. And I think everything's going great because you're paying the bills, the team are doing their showcases, and everything looks great. But you call me and say, and this has happened as well, hey, this person just doesn't seem to be firing and it's causing some issues with the team. Now, there is a governance process, and it's likely going through that governance process at the same time. But in a relationship, you call me and say, hey, I think I've got a problem here, and we just need to make sure we jump on it. Sweet spot. Okay, great. Let me just get together with my team, and let's not treat it like an emergency case, because it's not. Or maybe it is, and we need to treat it like an emergency case, but you've called me and said, hey, I think we need to look at this. Let's look at it together. So it's that side of, can you pick up the phone and have that conversation, as well as go through the official process to get the best possible result? And as a customer, I think if you want to know whether you're in the sweet spot, ask yourself the question, can I call this person up knowing that they're going to give me an honest response, or knowing that when they say, okay, I'm going to look into it, that they're going to look into it in the next 5 minutes? I think that's the point that you want to get to in a relationship. And Shane, if I look back on the way that you and I have worked together in the past, you're right, 60%, 50% hit rate, something like that, right? And I think we've had some great times, dancing across these RFPs and in all these projects and initiatives in the past. But I do recall at least one or two times where you needed someone to deliver a very niche part of the platform, and you called me because there weren't people, not at your current partner, in Australia, because some of the platforms we work with, a lot of it's just coming in from the US and getting pushed through the product team here locally. And it's amazing the journey that's evolved into, because where we weren't working together, you called me because you knew that I would turn something around. I went to my global team, found people in Boston, I think, one situation. That individual remotely, worked with your team, got through a few issues, decided to move to Australia. And that started an entire journey, not only for us re-engaging together and doing a lot of great work together again, but also for that individual starting a whole new path of their career. So I think building those trusted relationships is all about how can you communicate with your partner, and does that relationship transcend your brand or even the organization you're representing at any point in time. I think if you can ask yourself those questions and say yes, then you're in the sweet spot. And it does take time to build that trust, but it has to start somewhere.
You said it better than I could have said it, mate. Thank you. So now I might put you on the spot. And again, you can decline if you wish. But I feel like it would be disingenuous of us to talk about all these great relationships without recognizing the fact that sometimes shit goes pear-shaped, right? You want to, just for giggles, do you feel comfortable sharing a story about where something went pear-shaped?
Oh, that's a great question, Shane, because in any project, there's going to be challenges. And depending on what side of the fence you're on, they're going to have more or less impact, or at least be perceived that way. So we need to deal with these things. Being emotionally invested in these relationships, it actually takes its toll on me as an individual. And I know definitely on my team as well, who look to me to look after them. But, in one particular instance, I remember the proverbial did hit the fan, and somebody from the high ups gave me a call. I mean, they were in charge of the project, but they weren't necessarily hands-on day to day. And in a very blunt manner, said, if this person, an individual in my team, isn't working on this project tomorrow, I'll never do business with your organization ever again. Now, this person had taken a couple of days off for, a very good personal reason, nothing wrong, just they'd taken a few days off and they absolutely deserved it. And the work that needed to be done absolutely didn't need to be done by them. But they were called out and we were threatened that the brand was in, we were never going to get work again. We weren't going to get offered work again. And so naturally, I had to go to this person and say, listen, I'm sorry. I gave them a gift. I'm so sorry. I need you to come in and do this for the next 2 days. And they were as confused as I was as to why it had to be them. They did the work. The project wasn't any better off. I mean, we still fixed the problem in the exact same time that we would have fixed the problem anyway. But this person now I had to deal with internally to get them back on track and feeling like they were loved as a part of my organization and my team. And they're still with us today. But all of that energy spent for something that was so trivial, that was going sideways on a project. Every project's going to have these problems. It's just the way projects go. But the flip side for the customer, or sorry, not the customer, the individual, I'll never do business with that individual again, because it's not healthy, not just from a commercial perspective. I mean, they were one of the customers that squeezed us so much on the price for no good reason, right? We gave them our best people, but also because I know that when stuff does go wrong, instead of handling it in a professional manner where we will get a better outcome, that's the kind of response they have. And I know for a fact that that individual, didn't go on to do great things, at that global organization, and they have put out responses that we've chosen not to respond to, possibly not to their detriment, or maybe it was, who knows? But that is I guess, a war story of how not treating a partnership with respect, can actually cause undue pain for the partner, and potentially you could miss opportunities in the future as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you say, these things happen in projects, right? And more on one occasion, you've had the oh shit moment where you need a Hail Mary. But resorting to, I'm going to put a Glock to your temple if you don't do it my way, that's an interesting approach. So I'm honestly surprised you caved to them. I would have been inclined to, yeah. But maybe that's when the blunt instrument in me comes out and it needs to be put back in its box. I don't know. So... all right, we've been talking for a while, and I think we're probably running out of time. And as I said, I could go on all day. I've got all sorts of ideas where I want to take this conversation, but I will let you get back to your day. Before we go, though, we should be leaving listeners with something. So let's go for what I like to go. I always like to do the 3 takeaways, right? So what's the 3 takeaways that we can give to execs about engaging a partner?
Okay. Decide how you want to achieve your outcome. Do you want to own the risk, or do you want to share the risk? And this comes down to how well do you think you can solve the problem, and do you actually know what the problem is? If you absolutely 100% know what the problem is and you want to own the risk, go the body shop method. That's okay. If you absolutely know your way around it, you just need, the grunt work, go and do that. If you don't go and do that. Share the risk. Share the risk with people that know how to think this way and solve problems this way, because you know your business better than anyone and they know how to solve problems better than anyone. So decide how you want to achieve your outcome. And by the way, if you share the risk, you can get super fancy with commercial models, which I guarantee will excite your exec team as much as, squeezing the price. The risk reward system is amazing when you get fancy with it. The second point would be test the partnership. Before you dive in, go and run the beauty pageant, make some decisions on capability and relationship fit based on that flexible model of working, and then test it really quickly before you go and do your big transformation. And if you're a small organization where a big transformation is like a 6-month project, then do it just on a smaller scale. You can still run the same sort of testing model on a smaller scale as well. So test that partnership before you dive in, because that's where you're going to start building that trust and that relationship very early, which you're going to need in any project. And probably the third tip that I would give, for what it's worth, is just how we got to this conversation today and how you get to a lot of your conversations. Not just the Salesforce ecosystem, but just the technology and transformation landscape in Australia. It's small. We all know each other. We all work with each other. So, partnerships are going to outlast your job. Everybody in this business is a pleaser. They want things to go well. They want the customer to be happy. They want their business to be happy. So go into these engagements with that mindset that everybody's actually trying to do the right thing. Now, yes, you're going to get burned every now and again, but I guarantee you're going to have a better relationship and build trusted relationships and partnerships that outlast your job. And you talk a lot about this in the networking section of your book. That is going to serve you well beyond the project, I promise. So it's a small ecosystem. Try and build those trusted relationships with good intent rather than, guns at 10 paces.
There you go. You nailed it. Mate, thanks for spending the time. And importantly, thanks for reading the book, because you clearly actually read it, which is I'm really pleased about. And hopefully you can share some of that insight with your clients too. I'll leave it there. If anyone wants to get in touch with you to either share some of your wisdom or talk about how IBM might be able to help, how should they find you?
Yeah, the easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn. Lee, Lee, Tsiamis, Tsiamis. I'm the only one of me out there, so you won't find a duplicate. Reach out to me there, message me, follow me, whatever you want to do. I'm pretty easy to get in touch with through LinkedIn, and we can connect through there. But I really appreciate you having me on the podcast, mate.
It's all right, mate. Thanks for spending the time, and I'll make sure we put a link to your profile in the show notes. Thanks again. We will talk soon.
Wonderful. Thanks, Shane.
You've been listening to Platform Diaries with Shane Williams. For more information or to contact Shane, please visit shanewilliams.com.au. Until next time, thanks for listening.